binding ceremony had taken 3 hours. 3 hours of vows spoken over stone altars. 3 hours of ceremonial fire, of ancient words passed down through wolf dynasties older than memory. 3 hours of ivory silk and silver candles, and Harrison Duskbane's steady hand pressing his family's seal into the soft skin of Arabella Valamont's wrist. Now it was over, and Arabella stood alone in the stone bathing chamber at the east end of Ravencrest Keep, her feet submerged in water that smelled faintly of white cedar. The ceremonial silks pooled around her ankles. 2 iron torches cast their light in long, wavering columns across the dark walls. Steam rose from the soaking pool in quiet spirals. She was still. Her wrist was still raised from where she had been studying the bond mark, Harrison's crest. It pressed permanently into her skin less than 2 hours ago. 2 wolves intertwined, their bodies forming a circle that meant, in old wolf tradition, what is joined may not be undone. She looked at it the way she looked at everything new, carefully, without rushing to decide what she thought about it. The water around her feet was warm. That detail mattered to her, though she could not have said why. Warmth. She was still surrounded by warmth. It would matter more in a few minutes. The door to the adjacent preparation chamber opened. She did not look up. She did not move. Old keeps had old walls, and old walls carried sound through the stone in ways no one noticed unless they had spent their whole life studying where things were hidden. The narrow vent above her head, carved into the ceiling centuries ago for airflow, had been doing this since before anyone in the Ironhowl Dominion was born, carrying voices. Harrison's came first, low, controlled, the voice of a man who had never once in his life needed to lower it for secrecy, because secrecy had never required hiding. It required simply not thinking about who might be listening. The Valemont territories seal at dawn. Once it's done, it's done. The bond is legally complete. The second voice, Sebastian Northwood, Harrison's right-hand man. Easy, familiar. The comfortable tone of someone who had walked beside this alpha long enough to ask the questions others kept behind their teeth. And the girl herself? A pause. Brief. Clean. The specific kind of pause that does not contain uncertainty. It contains a decision already made, simply waiting for the right moment to be spoken aloud. She performed the ceremony correctly. She'll be housed well. Once she gives me an heir, a beat so weightless it barely disturbed the air around it. I'll replace her quietly. She won't suffer. One more beat. She simply won't matter. The water was still warm. The bond mark was still raised. Arabella's finger, which had been tracing the outer edge of the crest with the careful attention she gave to every new thing, had gone completely still. She did not look up. She did not make a sound. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth the way her mother had taught her to breathe when she was 9 years old and had just been told something that could have broken her if she let it. Her mother's voice came to her from 5 years gone, or from a sickbed at the Valemont lowlands, a room that smelled of winter herbs and old stone. Celestine Valemont, who had spent her last months saying only the things that would stay. Don't flinch. Whatever happens, don't let him see that you heard. The worst thing you can do is show your hand before you know the full shape of the game. Arabella looked at the water, at the bond mark, at her own hands, which were not shaking. She stood. She lifted one foot from the water, then the other. She dried them with the folded cloth on the stone bench beside the pool. She smoothed her ceremonial silks down over her knees, slowly, the way she did everything that mattered, without rush, without performance, with the full weight of intention behind each motion. She walked out of the bathing chamber. She walked back through the east corridor toward the bonding room, the sound of her own footsteps steady and unhurried against the stone floor, and she sat down at the small writing desk beneath the arched window and waited. Harrison arrived 19 minutes later. She had counted. He looked at her the way he had been looking at her all day, careful, assessing, present in the particular way of a man who has received something valuable and is already thinking about what use to put it toward. His dark eyes moved over her face. She smiled at him, warm, unhurried, the smile of a woman who has had a long and beautiful day, becoming someone's wife, and is simply glad to finally rest. "You should sleep," he said. "I will," she said. "Good night, Harrison." He paused at the door. Something moved across his face, too fast and too brief to name. She could not name it yet. She would learn his face. She had time. "Good night, Arabella," he said. The door closed. She sat alone in the bonding chamber with the mark cooling on her wrist and his words settling into every hollow place she had left open inside herself. She simply won't matter. She looked at the bond mark one last time. 2 intertwined wolves, his seal on her skin. Then she picked up the quill. She did not write anything yet. She simply sat in the quiet of her first night at Ravencrest Keep, in the keep that her ancestor had helped to build, in the dominion whose founding law bore the mark of her bloodline. And she began, carefully, completely, without a single wasted thought, to think. "Hey, before we go any further, I need to check on you for a second. How are you feeling right now?" And because stories like this, they hit deep. And I want you right here with me as it unfolds. Thank you for being here. It truly means more than you know. If this story is already pulling at your heart, and I know it is, take a moment to support the channel. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's get back to the story. The morning after the binding ceremony came in cold and grey, the way northern mornings always came to Ravencrest Keep, light the colour of old iron pressing through the narrow arched windows, wind moving through the outer corridors with the patient persistence of something that had been doing this for centuries and intended to continue. Arabella had been awake since before dawn. She did not announce this. She moved through the east corridor alone, the celebration sounds of the great hall long dissolved, the ceremony wolves and visiting delegation members still sleeping in their quarters down the long passage. She wore simple clothes, nothing ceremonial, nothing that announced her, just a woman walking through a keep she did not yet know, learning its shape. She called this her first survey. She did this everywhere new. Her mother had called it reading a room. Arabella had never limited it to rooms. She read corridors. She read stairwells. She read the way light came through a window at different hours, and what that told her about which direction the building faced. She read the quality of the stone, how old, how much weight had passed through it, what it remembered. Ravencrest Keep was older than its current alpha line. She could feel it in the walls. The stone remembered different hands, different names, different kinds of authority than what currently occupied its great hall. There were sections of the keep where the stonework changed, where the precision of one era gave way to the rougher work of another, overlaid like old paint on older paint on the original color beneath. She noted the lower quarter in the east wing, a separate section of the keep, older than the formal halls, where pack families lived. Border Patrol wolves and their children, elder wolves whose fighting days had passed, but whose knowledge had not. Young warriors knew enough to still look startled by things. She walked to the entrance of that wing and stopped, looking in. A narrow lane of connected rooms, a common hall at the center, or children's laughter coming from somewhere she could not yet see. She did not go in yet. She noted it. She noted the archive in the northeast tower. A plain door with iron fittings, no designation, the kind of door that announced itself only to people who were already looking. She passed it without pausing, the way she always passed things she intended to return to. The pack watched her as she moved through the keep. She was aware of it. The particular quality of eyes tracking something new, assessing it before deciding how to respond. She was the new acquisition. The Alpha's bondmate, come from the southern lowlands with her ceremonial silks and her Valemont name. They were deciding what she was. She let them look. She had nothing to hide and everything to learn. The morning council convened in the great hall an hour after sunrise. The long stone table, iron chairs, the quality of formality that came with rank and long habit, Harrison at the head, silver rings on both hands, the dark eyes moving through the room the way a sovereign's eyes moved, recording, categorizing, and dismissing what did not require further attention. He looked at her once when she entered. A brief nod. The precise acknowledgement of a man noting that something he had placed is where it should be. Arabella sat. She had been awake for 3 hours. In that time she had filled 2 pages of notes, observations about the keep's layout, the early sounds of the household, the names she had already begun gathering. She opened them now. Sebastian Northwood sat at Harrison's right hand, handsome in the easy, uncomplicated way of a man who had never needed to work at it, or he was courteous to her when the council began. He introduced her to the table with the precise warmth of a man performing a courtesy he had prepared in advance. She returned it exactly, and nothing more. She had heard his voice through a stone vent. She knew the shape of his loyalty. She would keep that knowledge folded carefully in the back of her mind, and use none of it yet. Across the table, Theodora Ashford watched her from the 3rd chair, with eyes the colour of winter. Sharp as old glass, unhurried, doing the same thing Arabella was doing, learning the shape of something new before deciding what it was. Theodora said nothing to her during the session. She simply watched. Arabella understood this. She was being evaluated by someone who had been evaluating people for 70 years and had not yet made a mistake she was aware of. Good. Or the best evaluators were worth earning. Montgomery Ravencrest sat at Harrison's left, broad and quiet as Riverstone, the kind of man whose loyalty had been built from the kind of experience that did not discuss itself. She noted the way his body stiffened slightly at loud, sudden sounds, not fear, something older than that. She filed it carefully. That evening, alone in her chambers, she opened the travelling chest she had packed herself. Beneath the folded garments, and the healer's kit, and the small wrapped books she had carried from the lowlands, her fingers found what she had known was there. A sealed letter. Her mother's mark pressed into the wax. Heavy paper, the kind her mother had always used for things that needed to last. To Camilla, the pack elder who had pressed it into Arabella's hands the morning she left the lowlands, had said only, "Your mother said you'd know when to open it." I suspect she meant when things become complicated. Arabella sat on the edge of her bed. The bond mark had long since stopped being warm. The keep was quiet. Outside, the northern wind moved against the stone walls. She broke the seal. The letter had 4 pages. She read only the first tonight. It was love, in the particular way her mother had always expressed love. Not with soft words, but with precision. With the specific weight of a woman who knew she was writing to a daughter she would not see grow up, and was determined to give her everything she needed to do it anyway. You are not what they married, Arabella. You are what you have always been. But make sure they find out what that is. On your terms, not theirs. Arabella sat with those words for a long time. Then she folded the letter, set it aside. She would return to it. Not tonight. Tonight she took out fresh parchment and wrote one line in her clean, careful hand. Where in the Ravencrest archive are the territorial water rights records? She would ask the pack archivist tomorrow. Casually, as a newly arrived wife, curious about the land she had married into. She went to bed. She lay in the dark with the bond mark on her wrist and the northern wind at the walls, and her mother's voice settling into the quiet like a stone, finding the bottom of deep water. You are not what they married. She closed her eyes. She slept better than she had any right to. The pack archivist's name was Augustus Winterbourne. He was small, meticulous, and visibly alive with happiness whenever anyone showed a genuine interest in his archive. But Arabella understood this within 6 minutes of their first conversation, and adjusted accordingly. Not to use him, but because genuine people responded to genuine curiosity, and she had always been genuinely curious. She asked real questions. She listened to the full answers. She remembered what he told her about filing systems, about the archive's organization, about which texts were water-damaged and which were simply an old script that required patience. By the end of their second conversation, Augustus Winterbourne would have shown her every room in the building without needing to be asked. She found what she was looking for on day 5. The founding scroll was misfiled in the territorial water rights section, between 2 land survey documents from 150 years ago, wrapped in plain oilcloth, no label, but the kind of misfiling that was not accidental. It was the specific work of someone who wanted something to disappear without the guilt of destroying it outright. She asked Augustus for a text she needed from the opposite shelf. He went to retrieve it, cheerful, his back to her. She unrolled the scroll with hands that did not shake. She read it standing at the shelf, in the quiet of the archive, with the sound of Winterbourne's shuffling footsteps moving away from her. She read it once. She read it a second time. She rolled it carefully back into its oilcloth and placed it exactly where she had found it. She thanked Augustus warmly when he returned. She walked back to her chambers with steady hands and a mind that had just reorganized itself entirely around a new center of gravity. By that evening, she opened the second page of her mother's letter. 150 years ago, before the Iron Howl Dominion existed, before Ravencrest Keep was built, before any current Alpha dynasty drew its first breath of authority, there was one sovereign. Her name was Seraphina Valamont. Arabella sat very still. She built the architecture of Alpha authority in the wolf world from nothing. She wrote the bond ceremonies. She established the founding compact. She laid the anchor words into every succession ritual that any Alpha dynasty would ever use. Words that, spoken by a living Valamont female, seal Alpha authority permanently into a bloodline. Words that, withdrawn or contested, leave that authority legally open to challenge. She did this because the wolf world of her time wouldn't accept a female sovereign. So she distributed her power across the first male Alpha kings and stepped back and let them believe it had always been theirs. Every Alpha who rules today rules on borrowed power, Arabella. Power that originated in this bloodline. Power that is still, under founding law, ours. The room was very quiet. Arabella looked at the bond mark on her wrist. 2 wolves intertwined. She had spoken the anchor word during the ceremony. She had not known what it was. She had not known its weight. She had spoken it because it was the word the ceremony required. Because she had been given no reason to understand it was anything more than tradition, and someone had made certain of that. She read the 3rd page. You will have been told you are a political alliance, a bloodline acquisition, a bondmate to strengthen the Dominion succession line. The truth is that you are the most legally significant wolf alive. That is why you were sought. Not for your family's territory, not for your name. for what your blood can lock into their succession permanently, if you allow it. Do not allow it cheaply. Do not allow it at all until you understand the full weight of what you carry. The anchor word is in the founding scroll. It has been misfiled in the Ravencrest archive for 150 years under territorial water rights, because Harrison Duskbane's grandfather was afraid of it. Find it. Read it. Understand what it means that you have already spoken it tonight in the bond ceremony, without knowing its full weight. And then decide, carefully, on your own terms, what you do next. The fourth page had one line. Come back to yourself, little wolf. Whatever happens in that keep, come back to yourself. Arabella sat for a long time after she folded the letter. She did not pace. She did not cry. She sat with the weight of it the way she sat with all large things. Still and present, and allowing herself to feel the full size of it before she began to decide what to do. She thought about Seraphina Vallemont, writing by candlelight 150 years ago, choosing to give away her own power because the world was not ready to let her keep it, choosing to distribute it, choosing to trust that someone, someday, would understand what she had hidden and know what to do. She thought about her mother, writing from a dying bed to a daughter not yet old enough to need the words, trusting that one day she would be. She looked at her hands. You are not what they married. As she took out fresh parchment, she wrote 2 notes. The first, to Camilla in the Lowlands, asking for the name of her mother's oldest contact in the founding law archives. The second, a question to herself, written in the private shorthand she had used since she was 12 years old. What does the anchor word actually do, and what does it mean that I have already spoken it? She sealed the letter. She set the question on her desk, where she could see it in the morning, and then she did something that might have looked, to anyone watching, like exactly what it was, and yet was something they could not have fully understood. She went to the writing desk. She signed her name on a fresh piece of parchment. Not Arabella Duskbane, which she had not used once since the ceremony. Not simply Arabella, which was too small. Arabella Vallemont. Oh, she looked at it. She went to bed. In his private study across the keep, Harrison sat with a letter from the Eastern Pax on his desk that he was not reading. He was thinking, with the particular, low-level distraction of a man who does not understand why he is distracted, about the way his bondmate had looked at him during the ceremony. Not adoringly, not nervously, directly. With those clear, unhurried eyes that did not drop when he met them, that did not flutter or perform. Just looked at him the way someone looked when they were trying to learn the exact shape of a new thing. He had never, in 12 years of being Alpha, had someone look at him like that. He set the thought aside. He picked up the letter from the Eastern Pax. He did not set it entirely aside. For 30 days, Arabella was perfect. Perfect was not difficult. Or this was the part that would have surprised anyone who assumed effort and strategy were the same thing. They were not. Effort meant working against something. Strategy meant working with what was already true. And what was already true was that Arabella Vallemont had been raised to be genuinely curious about people, and Ravencrest Keep, beneath its military authority and its formal halls and its careful hierarchy, was full of people worth being genuinely curious about. She simply had to let herself be interested. And she was. She always had been. The pack physician was named Remington Ashford, methodical, competent, and emotionally armored in the way of a man who had built his professional distance so carefully over so many years that he no longer noticed it was there. He was not unkind to his patients. He was efficient. He treated their bodies with skill and left their feelings to someone else. She noted this. She said nothing yet. Montgomery Ravencrest, she observed in council and in the corridors. She learned within a week that loud, sudden sounds made him go still in a way that had nothing to do with threat assessment. She adjusted her own behavior near him, never startled, never raised her voice, moved with consistent predictability near his station. She never acknowledged this. It was not a performance. It was a tension. Theodora Ashford continued to watch her from across every room, still evaluating, still withholding. Arabella met her gaze every time, and neither of them looked away first. It became, over 2 weeks, a kind of conversation without words. Arabella understood Theodora was not an obstacle. She was a gatekeeper. The gatekeepers who watched that carefully were worth the patience it took to be seen clearly by them. On the 8th day, she found the lower quarter properly. She had noted it from the corridor on her first survey. She had not gone in. She had waited until she had enough understanding of the keep's rhythms to move through it naturally. She went in on day 8 during a quiet morning. No announcement, no formal introduction. She simply walked into the common hall at the Wings Centre and sat down at one of the long tables with a cup of tea and the survey notes she was always carrying. The Pack families looked at her. She looked at her notes. She was clearly not performing anything. She was just there. After a while, an old wolf named Casimir sat down at the same table and asked her what she was reading. She showed him. He asked a question about the water survey maps she'd been studying. She answered it. He had 3 more questions. An hour passed without either of them noticing. She went back on day 9, and day 10, and day 11. On day 11, a small girl ran into her legs at full speed and looked up with the complete lack of embarrassment that belonged only to children who had not yet learned to be worried about what other people thought of them. Dark-haired, enormous eyes, a missing front tooth that gave her smile a gap wide enough to see the future through. "You're the new Alpha Lady." "I am," Arabella said. "My Da says you're from the south. Is it warm there?" "Very warm. Starbloom flowers grow all year." The girl considered this with the gravity of a world leader weighing a treaty. "I've never seen a starbloom flower." "Then I'll have to fix that," Arabella said. Her name was Juliet. Her father was a border patrol wolf named Dominic Thornfield, quiet and careful in the way of a man who took his responsibilities to heart. She had 2 older brothers and an opinion on everything she had ever encountered. By day 20, Arabella knew 14 children by name in the lower quarter. When she walked through that part of the keep, something changed in the air, a quality of ease, the kind that had nothing to do with her bond mark or her bloodline or anything Harrison. Duskbane had arranged. It was hers. She had built it herself, one name at a time, one genuine question at a time. On day 23, Harrison started appearing in places he had no reason to be. Not the council sessions. Those were his. The other places. The lower quarter hallway. Twice. Near the archive entrance. Twice. Once at the east corridor entrance at the exact hour she finished her morning survey. She noticed. She did not let him see that she noticed. On day 27, she turned a corner in the lower quarter lane and nearly walked into him. He was crouched down, not performing authority, not managing a situation, just crouching in the lane with Juliet's oldest brother, a serious 9-year-old named August, asking him about the border patrol routes with complete and focused attention, but as if the boy's answer genuinely mattered. August was answering with authority. Arabella walked past them. She did not smile until she had turned the corner. Her handmaid's name was Delphine Frostfang. Sharp, loyal, and constitutionally suspicious of everyone who had not yet earned something better from her. She had been assigned to Arabella's service the morning after the ceremony, and had spent the first week watching the new bondmate with the same careful attention Theodora used across the council table, only more personal, and therefore more precise. He watches you when you don't watch him, Delphine said one evening, her hands moving through Arabella's hair with practiced steadiness. I know, Arabella said. It's different from how he watched you in the first week. Arabella was quiet for a moment. Does that change anything? Delphine asked. She looked at herself in the mirror, at the bond mark, at her own steady eyes, which had not once in 30 days let her face show what was happening beneath it. Ask me in 30 days, she said. On day 31, a letter arrived from the Founding Law Archives. The chief scholar would come. Arabella read it twice, folded it, placed it in the travelling chest beneath everything else, went to dinner, laughed at the right moments, asked Montgomery about the northern winters with the genuine curiosity she brought to every question. She was, for the last time, simply perfect. Tomorrow she would begin to be something else. That night, Harrison came to the East Corridor, at the hour she usually returned from her evening survey. He fell into step beside her without announcement. The corridor was empty, or their footsteps were the only sound for a long time. The lower quarter, he said. You go every day. The pack is there, she said simply. He said nothing for a long stretch of corridor. They speak of you, he said. In the council sessions, wolves who have never spoken of anything except patrol reports. She kept walking. You've been here 30 days, he said. I have. A pause that was not empty. A pause that held something he had not decided whether to say. Good night, Arabella, he said at the corridor's end. Good night, Harrison, she said. She did not watch him walk away, but she felt, very specifically, that he watched her. She closed her chamber door. She stood in the dark for a moment. Something had lived, briefly, in those 40 steps beside him. Something warm and unwelcome and entirely inconvenient. She acknowledged it the way she acknowledged all inconvenient truths, with complete honesty, and without letting it make a single decision for her. She opened the Founding Law letter and read it until the lamp ran low. Day 32. She arrived at the morning council table, sat, opened her survey notes, and when the teapot was passed, she poured her own cup and set the pot within easy reach of Montgomery beside her. Montgomery reached over and poured Harrison's cup without thinking. Harrison's dark eyes moved to Arabella across the table. She was reading her notes. He said nothing. The morning session covered border patrol rotations and a water rights dispute between two subordinate pack families. Standard business? The kind that had been running through councils like this one for decades without resolution, because the resolution required someone to think past the surface of the problem. When the water rights section arrived on the agenda, Arabella set down her notes. The upstream family is diverting during dry season, she said. The downstream family isn't receiving their share. The solution isn't arbitration, it's infrastructure. A secondary channel, here she indicated the map, would serve both families without either one conceding anything. The room went quiet. Theodora looked at the map, then at Arabella. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted in the specific way of a woman making a new assessment. That would require pack labor allocation, Theodora said. 2 weeks, Arabella said. The terrain is straightforward. I've reviewed it. Theodora made a note. Harrison said nothing. After the session, as the council filed out, he stopped beside her chair. You surveyed the water terrain. I survey everything, she said pleasantly, gathering her notes. It's a habit. She left before he could respond. She went to Remington Ashford that same afternoon and proposed it directly. Open healing sessions, 3 mornings a week. The lower quarter common hall. No appointment required. Any pack member welcome. He looked at her with the careful expression of a man who had learned not to assume what anything meant until he had thought it through completely. The Alpha's bondmate, he said slowly. Running open sessions in the lower quarter. The sovereign healer of the Valamont bloodline, she said, equally slowly, turned making herself available to the pack she lives in. A pause. Something shifted behind Remington's careful eyes, the specific shift of a man encountering a frame he had not considered before and finding it more solid than he expected. I'll arrange the space, he said. A young warrior named Felipe Viramont came in on the third session, broad across the shoulders, young enough that his face still had some of the openness of the boy he had recently been. He had a shoulder injury he had been managing quietly for 2 months rather than report it. She worked on it for 40 minutes while he stared at the ceiling and tried not to show how much relief he was feeling. "Why didn't you come sooner?" she asked. Didn't want to be stood down from patrol. Remington would have managed it. Remington doesn't. He stopped. Remington doesn't make it feel safe to need help, she finished. Felipe was quiet for a moment. He's good at what he does, he said carefully. He is, she agreed. That's not what I said. She made a note to speak with Remington, not critically, carefully. He had built his distance for reasons, and reasons deserved to be understood before they were questioned. Harrison appeared at the lower quarter common hall entrance on the 6th session day. Not inside. At the entrance, standing in the doorway, his dark eyes moving through the room. 8 pack members. Arabella at the center of it, working on an elderly wolf's knee, her hand steady and unhurried, her attention complete. He stood there for perhaps 2 minutes. Then he left. She had seen him. She said nothing about it. That evening, he came to her chamber. He knocked. She set down her quill. She noted the knock the way she noted everything that was different from what had come before. "Come in," she said. He stood in the doorway. Training clothes, not formal dress. He had come from evening drills. Unplanned then, or less planned than usual. The pack speaks of you constantly, he said. They are wonderful people, she said. She was at her writing desk. The founding law correspondence was open in front of her. She did not close it. He looked at the letter on her desk. She watched him decide not to ask about it. You know this pack better than advisors who have served here for a decade, he said. I paid attention, she said simply. It's not complicated. Most people are simply waiting for someone to notice them. Something moved across his face. There and gone. Good night, Harrison, she said, till he stood in the doorway for one more moment, long enough that the silence between them had a shape. Then he left. Delphine appeared from the adjoining room with the particular presence of a woman who had been very carefully not listening. He stayed in the doorway longer than he needed to. I know. He's recalculating. I know. A pause. Then, with the particular directness Arabella had come to depend on, Are you all right? Arabella looked at the founding law correspondence, at the bond mark, at her hands, which were steady. Every single day it costs me something, she said quietly. That is exactly why I cannot stop. She signed the letter to the founding archives that night, with her full bloodline name for the first time. Arabella Valamont, sovereign bloodline, unanchored. She sealed it. She sent it at dawn. The founding archives' chief scholar arrived on a grey morning in the 6th week. Her name was Celestine Kingsley. Perhaps 60, with silver-streaked hair cut practically short, and eyes the colour of old manuscript ink. She arrived alone on horseback, with 2 saddlebags, and no ceremony whatsoever. She found Arabella mid-session in the lower quarter common hall, and waited in the doorway until the last patient had gone. Then she walked in, set her bags on the bench, and spoke without any preamble. Your mother wrote to me 14 years ago. She said her daughter would contact me eventually, When she did, I should come immediately and bring the Valemont founding correspondence. Arabella looked at her. She wrote to you when I was 5. She was a woman who planned ahead. They spent 4 hours in the East reading room with the door closed. What Celestine Kingsley laid out confirmed everything in her mother's letter, and went further. The anchor word spoken in a bond ceremony did 2 things at once. First, it sealed the receiving Alpha's succession line permanently under founding compact law. Second, it created a living legal record in the Keeper archives of a voluntary Valemont activation, a record that could be formally reviewed. And if the Keeper archives determined that the activation had been obtained under deliberate misrepresentation, a bond entered with concealed intent, then the anchor's permanence became legally contestable. Arabella was very still. He told his right-hand man he would replace me after the air, she said. This happened before the ceremony. Celestine Kingsley's expression didn't change. Then the activation conditions are formally questionable, she said. You hold significant leverage, Arabella. Do you understand that? I understand it, Arabella said carefully. I have not decided what to do with it yet. Celestine Kingsley looked at her for a long moment. Your mother said you would say something like that. What did she say after? She said you would also know when. 3 days later, a delegation from the Western Reaches arrived for the summit season. 6 riders in amber and grey, formal and correct. The Alpha's name was Augustus Stormfang, tall, dark-haired, with gold eyes that held warmth and intelligence in the same proportion. He wore authority the way some people wore a well-made coat, like it had been made for him, and he had never once needed to think twice about putting it on. During the recess of the formal council session, he crossed the great hall directly to Arabella. He bowed, not a formal pack bow, a genuine inclination of the head, unhurried, the kind that meant something. Sovereign Valemort, he said, I have been hoping to speak with you. I have 2 Valemont-trained healers in my territory, whose work is being subjected to Dominion claims, and I would very much like to discuss what protections might be available to them. Arabella looked at him. He met her gaze without calculation, or rather, with calculation so transparent it read as honesty. He wanted something. He was telling her directly what it was. She found it remarkably refreshing. I have time, she said. They spoke for an hour in the council antechamber. He was precise, genuinely informed about founding compact healer protections, and asked intelligent questions. He was also watching her with the particular quality of attention that a person gave to something they found genuinely interesting. Already engaged, already curious, the decision to be present made before the conversation began. You've been in the Dominion 6 weeks, he said, and you already know more about this territory's founding law than its Alpha King. I read quickly, she said. He smiled. Your mother's reputation was formidable. I think she undersold what she was raising. Arabella was quiet for a moment. Most people did. Their loss, Augustus said simply, and potentially our gain, if you're willing to consider a formal alliance around healer sovereign rights. Send me their case documentation, Arabella said. I'll review it. He nodded. Then, before standing, for what it's worth, I see what the Dominion is holding, and I want you to know that I understand its value, all of it. She held his gaze. I know you do, Augustus. That's precisely why I'll be careful. He received that without offense. He seemed, if anything, more interested. Harrison had been across the hall for the second half of the conversation. She knew this. She tracked the quality of a room's attention when it shifted, the way 2 council members had stopped speaking, the way Montgomery had positioned himself 2 steps closer to Harrison than usual. Harrison was not watching Augustus. He was watching her. She met his gaze for one clean moment. Then she turned back to her notes. That evening, His footsteps caught up to hers in the corridor outside the great hall. "The Western Alpha finds you remarkably interesting," he said. His voice was controlled. His jaw was tight. She looked at him. "He treats me as though what I know has value," she said. "I'm finding it a useful contrast." She walked past him. Behind her, while she heard a long, exhaled breath, the sound of a man who has received an answer he cannot argue with, and is not accustomed to that particular experience. She did not turn around. That night, alone in the East reading room, she laid 2 documents side by side. On the left, Augustus Stormfang's proposed framework for healer sovereign protections. On the right, Celestine Kingsley's notes on the anchor clause contestability. She looked at both for a long time. Neither was a weapon. Both were architecture. Her mother had taught her the difference when she was 12 years old, in the stone room beneath the Valemont Lowlands pack house, pressing both hands on her shoulders, and speaking with the steady certainty of a woman who had spent a lifetime knowing things she had not yet had occasion to use. Weapons destroy what's already there, but architecture builds what comes next. Know which one you're holding before you pick it up. Arabella picked up her quill. She began to build. The letter from her mother's oldest contact arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after the binding ceremony. His name was Maximilian Winterbourne, 78 years old, silver-haired, with handwriting that was large and slightly unsteady and entirely precise. He had served 3 Alpha dynasties as a founding law consultant. He had known Celestine Valemont since they were both young enough to believe the world was straightforward, and he had watched her spend a lifetime preserving something the world had been trying to forget. He confirmed everything Celestine Kingsley had told her. Then he told her the part Celestine Kingsley had not. That the distribution of authority Seraphina Valemont created was not permanent by design. It was provisional, a temporary measure she intended to reclaim when the world was ready. She documented this in the original founding compact, a clause deliberately excluded from every official copy distributed to Alpha dynasties for a century and a half. The clause states, "When a living Valemont female of direct matrilineal descent formally declares sovereign status before the Keeper Archives and 3 witnessing elder pacts, the provisional distribution of founding authority enters a review period. During that period, the Valemont sovereign holds concurrent authority with all sitting Alpha kings, not above them, not replacing them, but alongside them as the founding compact's original signatory. Your grandmother attempted this declaration. She was discouraged from completing it by methods I am not proud to have witnessed, and did nothing to prevent. I am telling you now because I am old enough to be done with silence, and because your mother asked me 14 years ago to tell you when you were ready. You are ready. I have been watching." Arabella went to the archive. She found the founding scroll where she had found it on day 5, misfiled, plain oilcloth, no label. She unrolled it. She read the 4th page. The margin script was small. Old ink faded at the edges, formed with the particular care of someone who had understood they were writing something that would matter for a very long time. She read it once. She read it again. She sat down on the cold stone floor of the archive aisle with the scroll in her lap. She sat for 3 full minutes without moving. "Oh, the mother," she said quietly to the empty room. "You knew exactly what you were sending me into." 3 evenings later, she arrived in the East reading room to find Harrison already there. Plain clothes. No Montgomery at a respectful distance. Just Harrison, alone, at the long reading table with a bound text open in front of him, the founding histories, and the specific posture of a man who was being reorganized from the inside by something he had not expected to encounter. He looked up when she entered. She crossed to her shelf. She retrieved her notes. She sat at the far table and began to work. He went back to his reading. They did not speak. The quality of the silence between them was different from other silences they had shared. It was not empty. It was the silence of two people who are both reading the same world from different angles, and have not yet decided whether to acknowledge what that means. She came back the next evening. He was already there again. This continued. On the fourth shared evening, he spoke without looking up from the founding histories. Seraphina Vallemont. She's mentioned in 3 separate founding texts, always briefly, always in a way that feels edited, like someone went through afterward and made her smaller than she was. Arabella's quill kept moving. The bond ceremony language, he continued, the anchor word. It's attributed to the first council of Alpha Kings in every official record. He turned a page. But the linguistic construction, it isn't council language. It's older. It's a single voice. Whose voice do you think it is? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment. I think you already know, he said. She looked up. He was looking at her. The dark eyes held something she had not seen in them before. Not calculation, not the management of a resource, but the specific discomfort of a man who had been reading for weeks and had just understood the shape of what he had not known. How long have you known? He asked. Since my first week here, she said. He received that without argument. He went back to his reading. They sat in silence for another hour. When she rose to leave, he said her name, just Arabella, in a low voice that had none of its usual authority in it. She paused in the doorway. I have been Alpha for 12 years, he said. I have read every military record, every border negotiation, every trade compact in this archive. I have read none of the founding histories until 3 weeks ago. She waited. That says something about what I thought mattered, he said. Yes, she said. It does. What would it have taken? His voice was quiet. Genuine. For you to have trusted me from the beginning, what would I have needed to be? She considered it. The question was honest. She could hear that. You would have needed to be curious about me before you needed to be, she said. Not about my bloodline, not about the anchor word, about me, before any of that had a use. The silence that followed had weight. I don't know how to apologize for that, he said. It isn't the right shape for it. She agreed. Not yet. She left. She walked down the corridor. She sat on the edge of her bed and pressed both palms flat against her knees and stayed completely still for 2 full minutes, which was what she did when something had moved through her that she needed to settle before she could think clearly about it. The warmth of those last few minutes in the reading room. Not managed. Not performed. Like something raw. She let it settle. She went back to her documents. 3 days before the Grand Summit, a pale flower appeared outside her chamber door. A small clay pot. One moon bloom, open toward the corridor light, as if looking for a window. No note. No identification. Just the flower, sitting on the stone floor outside her door in the grey early morning. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she picked it up, carried it inside, and set it on the windowsill where the morning light would reach it. Delphine said nothing. She didn't need to. The Grand Summit convened at the full moon at the ancient neutral grounds, the convergence point of 4 major territories that no pack claimed and all packs acknowledged. Stone walls older than any existing Alpha dynasty. A roof open to the sky at the center, or so that every wolf assembled beneath it stood under the same moon. This had never needed explaining. Under an open sky, no Alpha had a home advantage. Every Alpha and Elder from the known wolf world attended. Arabella rode in the formal procession beside Harrison, bondmate on his left, the correct position. Midnight silk, the Vallemont silver crescent at her collar. She held her chin level and looked forward and gave the watching crowd nothing to read. Standard Summit business occupied the morning. Arabella sat beside Harrison, present and composed, contributing when addressed, showing nothing on her face that could be read as anything other than careful attention. Harrison was, she observed, different in this room than he had been 3 months ago. He deferred twice to observations from subordinate pack elders, not performing deference, not managing the room's impression of him, but genuinely deferring, the way a man deferred when he had recently learned he didn't know everything and was still adjusting to what that meant. She noted it. She filed it in the private place she did not examine closely. During the afternoon recess, she crossed to where Augustus Stormfang stood with his delegation. He handed her the final, ratified version of the Sovereign Accord, co-signed by 7 elder packs, documented under Keeper Archives authority. 7 co-signatories, she said quietly. 8, Augustus said. Theodora Ashford signed this morning. Arabella went still. Theodora, Harrison's own council elder. The woman who had watched her from the 3rd session with those old glass eyes, who had made a note in the water rights meeting, who had been deciding for 3 months what she was looking at. She said, Augustus continued, that she had watched you learn the pack children's names before you learned the council's titles, and that any sovereign worth the founding compact would do exactly that. Arabella looked across the hall to where Theodora sat in the elder section, upright, precise, not looking in Arabella's direction, simply present, the way a woman was present when she had made a decision she did not need to announce. "Are you ready?" Augustus asked. She thought about Seraphina's handwriting in a margin, about her mother's letter, about Juliet taking her hand in the lower quarter lane, about a moon bloom on a windowsill. "Yes," she said. The afternoon session opened. The facilitator worked through the agenda. 4th item, a matter of sovereign healer recognition, submitted by the Western Reaches delegation, co-signed by 8 elder packs, documented under Keeper Archives' formal authority. Harrison's jaw tightened by the smallest fraction. She felt it, the specific quality of stillness from her left, the posture of a man who has been reading founding histories for 3 weeks and has just seen the thing he was reading about step into the room. She rose. The hall went quiet with the specific quality of silence that falls when a room understands something is about to change. "I address this summit as sovereign of the Valemont founding line," she said. Recognized under Keeper Archives' formal documentation, the Multi-Pack Accord ratified by 8 elder territories, and the original founding compact's provisional clause, which this summit will now hear read in full for the first time in 150 years. She let it settle. Celestine Kingsley rose from the Keeper Archive section. She read the provisional clause aloud, slowly, clearly, without editorial comment. The founding scroll lay open on the Keeper's table, visible to anyone who wished to verify the margin script themselves. The room was extraordinary in its stillness. Arabella continued. She explained the Valemont founding line, what Seraphina had built, what had been distributed, what had been borrowed for 150 years under the assumption that no one was keeping records. "The wolf world does not need to be dismantled," she said. "It needs to be honestly understood, and every alpha in this room rules well or poorly on the merits of their own governance. That has always been true. What is also true, and what has been deliberately hidden for a century and a half, is that the legal architecture beneath that authority originated in a single source. A pause. That source is present in this room, and she is done being hidden." She placed the Sovereign Accord on the summit table. The accord passed. Into the silence that followed, Augustus Stormfang rose. "For the record, my relationship with Sovereign Valemont has been, from the first conversation to this moment, a strategic alliance toward the ratification of this accord. I was not pursuing the Alpha King's bondmate. A pause, something like open admiration in his voice. I was watching her build the architecture to protect her own people, as I was honored to hold the tools while she built it. He sat. The hall exhaled. She gathered her documents, unhurried, exact. She walked toward the hall's door. Harrison caught up to her in the wide stone corridor beyond. He stepped in front of her, not blocking, not demanding, simply stopping, the movement of a man who has run out of room for strategy and arrived, finally, at the place where only honesty is left. "What does this mean for us?" he said. She looked at him. The old warmth moved, steady and inconvenient. "You designed this bond as a transaction," she said. "As a businesswoman, I must tell you, I don't renegotiate closed contracts." Something broke in his face. Not dramatically, a small fracture, precise as glass. "Arabella. But I am open," she said carefully, "to new ones." She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she walked away. She felt, between her shoulder blades, as specific and certain as weather, the weight of his eyes following her down the corridor, the weight of a man who has just understood the full cost of something he had been certain he had paid nothing for. Understanding that the bill had simply been waiting. She did not look back. She had a sovereign seat to build. She returned to Ravencrest Keep. This surprised everyone who had been watching. The assembled packs had assumed she would go to the Valemont lowlands, that the summit would be the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new and separate one. She did not. She returned because the pack needed her, because her healing work did not make exceptions for personal complications, and because, though she said this to no one, not even Delphine, running would have given the story an ending it had not yet earned. She rode through the Ravencrest gates on a grey afternoon, alone, arriving ahead of Harrison's formal procession by her own arrangement. The pack was waiting in the courtyard, not out of obligation, not because protocol demanded it. They were simply there, the particular gathering of people who have decided, without being organized, that a moment matters. Dominic Thornfield stood near the gate with Juliet on his shoulders. Montgomery stood with his patrol unit, back straight. Remington Ashford was at the infirmary entrance. Theodora had ridden ahead and stood at the keep's main door with the upright precision of a woman holding a position she had decided was hers to hold. Felipe Viremont caught Arabella's eye as she dismounted. He straightened. "Sovereign," he said clearly, so the courtyard could hear it. The word moved through the assembled pack like something dropped into still water. She looked at him. "Felipe," she said. "How's the shoulder?" He smiled, the full open smile of a young man who had learned that it was safe to need something. "Perfect." She walked inside. That evening, she found him in the Moonbloom garden, or she had planted it herself in the keep's inner courtyard in her 3rd week. Seeds sent from the Valemont lowlands in a package Delphine had accepted without comment, planted by Arabella's own hands in the soil of the inner yard at an hour when no one else was awake. A quiet act, a private one. She had never announced it. The flowers had taken. They bloomed pale and open in the dark, their faces turned up toward the night sky. Harrison was sitting on the low stone wall at the garden's edge. He did not look like an Alpha King. He looked like a man who had sat down because he did not know where else to go. Shoulders not quite straight, hands loose in his lap, dark eyes on the pale flowers. She walked into the garden. He looked up. He did not rise. She sat beside him on the stone wall. Not close, not touching. The particular distance of 2 people who haven't yet decided what the space between them means. He spoke first. "I said you wouldn't matter." His voice was low and even. "I said it because I believed it, because I had never once in my life looked at a person and asked what they were before deciding what they were for. He was quiet for a moment. You are the most consequential thing that has ever walked into this keep. He looked at her directly. I don't mean your bloodline. I mean the woman who learned my pack's children's names before she learned the council's titles, who sat in an archive and built something just when she had every right to build something else, who planted moon blooms in my courtyard and went to the lower quarter every morning and made my physician remember why he chose medicine. He stopped. But I mean you. Specifically. Entirely. The garden was quiet around them. I know this is not enough, he said. I am not asking you to forgive what I said. I am asking you to believe that the man who said it and the man sitting beside you are not the same man, and that the difference is you. Arabella looked at the moon blooms for a long time. She thought about the bathing chamber, the water still warm, the bond mark freshly raised, his voice coming through the stone vent with no weight in it at all. She thought about her mother writing that letter from a dying bed. She thought about Seraphina, 150 years ago, distributing power she should have been allowed to keep, trusting that someday someone would know what to do with what she had left behind. She thought about Juliet in the lower quarter lane, but about Theodora at the keep's main door, about Felipe saying sovereign with a voice that meant it. She thought about a moon bloom on a windowsill. I believe you, she said. He exhaled. A long, careful release. The sound of a man setting down something he had been holding for longer than he understood. That is not the same as forgiving you, she said. I know. Or trusting you. I know. Or certainty about what comes next. I know. A pause. I'm not asking for certainty. I'm asking for the possibility of earning what I didn't understand I was being given. She turned and looked at him directly. The dark eyes were open in a way she had never seen them. No management behind them. No strategy. Just a man looking at a woman and asking. Not for what was owed him. Not for what was convenient. But for a chance he understood he had not earned and was asking for anyway because he had nothing left that was more honest. You have a very long way to go, she said. I know. I'm not going to make it easy. I wouldn't recognize easy, he said quietly. I've never wanted it. Something moved in her chest, the old warmth, stubborn and specific, recognizing a sound it had been waiting to hear without knowing it was waiting. She did not close it this time. She did not open it all the way either. She looked back at the moon blooms. I don't know yet what this becomes, she said. That is the truth, not a closed door, not a promise, just the truth. That's more than I deserve, he said quietly. She did not tell him he was wrong. She did not tell him he was right. They sat together in the moon bloom garden as the night moved around them, not touching, not resolving. Two wolves on a stone wall in the dark, the space between them neither a gap nor a border, but something still being decided, carefully, by both of them, for the first time. And both of them, for the first time since a bathing chamber and a stone vent and a bond mark pressed into warm skin, being completely honest about not knowing what came next. The moonblooms were open. Arabella Vallemont, who had entered Ravencrest Keep as a transaction and spent 3 months becoming something the wolf world had forgotten it needed, sat with her hands quiet in her own lap and felt something she had not let herself feel since the night she sat at a writing desk and decided to think rather than break. Not certainty. Not resolution. Hope. Quiet and stubborn. Entirely her own. She would see what it grew into. 2 wolves, at one garden, a story that began in betrayal and ended, not in surrender, not in grand declarations, but in the harder, rarer thing, an honest beginning.